Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and this is Italian roast pork shoulder. For this recipe, we're cooking a Boston butt pork shoulder, deboned so that we can get slices all the way through the roast. And we're gonna truss it to keep it all together. First thing we need to do is get that blade bone out of the butt. Here we have our 9-pound pork butt, and you can see here where this blade bone sits. It runs right through the center of this thing. Now before I cut it out of here, I'm gonna trim up the rest of this butt, starting with the fat cap. So most of the time when I'm cooking pork butts, I'll take this fat cap off for a few different reasons. One, because we really don't need all that extra fat. This muscle has plenty of intramuscular fat that's running through it that's going to melt as the butt cooks and really keep the inside moist and juicy. The other thing is, if we leave that fat cap on, we really don't get the opportunity to season the meat underneath it. So when you finish cooking it, you'll have this really nice, moist, juicy meat, but you're gonna throw that fat cap out anyway, and it doesn't have any seasoning down there. So I found that it's really worth taking just a couple of minutes it takes to remove that fat cap, expose all of that meat underneath. Next, I'm feeling around on the other side to see if there's any bones or cartilage left behind. I'm not feeling any on this one, which is great, but there is some kind of gross stuff. Any of this connective tissue, stuff that you know you're not gonna wanna chew on later, you might as well get rid of it now. And with these pork butts, you'll find that on the side opposite of the fat cap, there's this crevice where the muscles come together. And everything in between there is just that connective tissue that, again, not gonna hurt you to eat it, but it's not necessarily pleasant. So we'll go ahead and take that off as well. So this just takes a few minutes to get rid of this stuff, but I think it's really worth the time. Sometimes you'll skip it just to save yourself a little bit, but in culinary school, I had a chef instructor that would always tell me if you wouldn't serve it to your mom, then you shouldn't be serving it. And I wouldn't feel good about serving that to my mom. So I'm getting rid of it. Now to get this bone out of here, I'm gonna start positioned fat cap down. Here's the edge of that bone. And that bone runs flat here, and then it's kind of got this crazy blade shape on the bottom side. So what I'm gonna do is just start running my knife right along the side of the bone. Follow it all the way around, and you're just letting the bone guide the knife. Now sometimes the bone will turn right here. It depends on where the butcher cuts that off, but this one goes all the way out to the side, you can see here. And you can see how we're just scraping across the flat part of that bone right there. This is one of those things that you're just gonna do a few times before you really feel comfortable doing it. But I think once you guys see this thing come out and understand the shape of it, that kind of helps. All right, so there's that crazy blade we were talking about, just sort of sticks up. So now that we've removed this, kind of put it back so you can understand where it was. This is the opposite side of the fat cap. This opens up, we trim this out. You've got your flat side, and then that blade sticking up on the other side. So then we're just gonna put this back together, and like I said, truss this all up so it stays. Now that the pork butt is deboned, it's all trimmed up, we're gonna get it trussed, but before we can truss it, we need to get it seasoned. The seasoning we're using today is actually a wet rub. Now, a lot of times you guys see us shake on dry rubs, and that's a really common way to season your pork butts. But today we want to add some additional flavors. We're going to be using some pepperoncini, we're going to be using some marinade in the rub, and then some dry rub as well. So it all kind of comes together to form this paste that we're going to slather all over this pork butt before we truss it up. I'm going to start this thing off with a half cup of Smoke on Wheels barbecue marinade. Then we'll add about a quarter cup of Italiano. And that's where a lot of our Italian herbs and spices are going to come from. You can see the fennel seed in there. There's a lot of great flavors in that. We'll add to that about 3/4 ounce of pepperoncinis. And then weight-wise, you want to go with about the same amount of garlic, which works out to about 4 good-sized cloves. And now for the fresh herbs, we're going to go with a 1/2 ounce each of fresh oregano and fresh rosemary. Just strip those leaves right off the stems. And that goes for both the oregano and the rosemary. I'm just going to run a knife through here just to help break it down before we get this to the food processor. All right, so now we're going to get this into the food processor, break it on down. All right, and there we have our wet rub, Italian paste. Let's just give it a taste. Woo! It's intense. That's gonna go great. A lot of flavor in there, but we got a lot of pork to cover. All right, there's no better way to do this than to just get your hands in there and get dirty. So we're just gonna slather this all over. And let's not forget, we've got this area in here we can cover in seasoning as well. We're going to leave this right on the pan because you're going to see that as we start to truss this, some of that seasoning is going to fall off again. If we leave it in the pan, we can catch it, put it back on the pork before we get it on the smoker. All right, we're going to start with our butcher's twine down here at the money muscle end. Tie this off. Okay, so then what you want to do is create a loop. Feed that over where you've already trussed. Give yourself a couple of inches in between and pull it tight. Just kind of ratchet that into place. You're going to do the same thing. So we work our way down the pork butt. And then of course when you get down here to where you've done all your trimming, that's where it really matters. I'm going to try and hold this stuff together. All right, so we're trying to keep that evenly spaced. Keep a uniform shape. And then once you get down here, you're going to come around to the other side. So just flip this right over. And at this point, I'm actually going to snip the end of the twine over here. Give yourself plenty to work with, but you're going to need to feed this through, so as you get back to this first place where you trussed, you're going to go right around that thing. And you want that to be tight as well. Same thing, pull it through on the next truss. There we go. Just keep working your way down the roast. Trying to keep that evenly spaced as much as possible. All right, we made it all the way back down to the other end. Flip it one more time. Around the money muscle. And right back to where you started. Feed that through where your original knot is and tie it off. All right, so give that a couple of knots. You're back to where you started. Trim the excess. One long piece of string, and that thing is fully trussed. One nice uniform shape. Today we're cooking on the Weber Summit charcoal grill. Just want to give a shout out to Greg and Eileen from North Dakota. Stopped in, they reminded us just how cool of a grill this is, so we thought we'll do this one for you guys. We've got this set up for indirect cooking. What we're doing today is a roast, or you could think of it as a hot smoke. We're gonna cook at about 325 degrees, but we're gonna use some kiln-dried applewood chunks to give us some smoky flavor. All right, we got flame. These are gonna give us some good smoke. Go back to indirect. And we're ready for the pork butt. All right, so we'll place that right dead center, lots of smoke movement around it. And for now, we're just gonna let this soak up the smoke and start to build a really nice bark. All right, this roast pork has been in here for about 2.5 hours. I've been periodically feeding it another chunk of wood just to continue to get the smoke going. And in that time, just 2.5 hours, it's taken on a lot of color, which is fantastic. It also tells me that it's taken on a lot of smoke flavor. So at this point, I'll show you what it looks like, but we're ready to wrap this thing up. Look at that, just beautiful color. Nice bark formed on the outside. Let's pull this thing off of here and get it wrapped up. All right, as we wrap this thing up, oh man, it smells just amazing. You get all those herbs coming out of there, the garlic, but it's smoky now. The one thing we want to add to the wrap here is a little bit of Italian vinaigrette. This is just a store-bought Italian vinaigrette dressing. So it's tangy, it's gonna add some lemon to that. And then we're gonna wrap this nice and tight to finish with a braise. We wanna wrap this as tight as we can without puncturing the foil. We don't want any room for steam to form and wash away that bark we've created. And then one more layer, just to be safe. We're gonna continue to cook this at about 325 to 350. And as the fat melts out of the pork and the juices kind of come out of there, it's gonna combine with that dressing that we've put in there and braise the pork until it's nice and tender. But we're not gonna take this thing all the way to pulled pork. What we're shooting for today is an internal temperature closer to about 190. And when we finish it just a little bit lower than we would pulled pork, it allows us the opportunity to actually slice this. So the slices will hold together rather than the whole thing just falling apart. And that's great for sandwiches. Now you'll notice that I didn't get my thermometer out. I'm not checking for temperature at this point. I was just looking for the perfect color, and we're there. About 2.5 hours was just right. At this point, I'm gonna let this continue to cook. We'll check on it probably about 45 minutes and see where the temperature's at. All right, here we are almost 4 hours into this cook, just shy of it, and we're crossing that 190 threshold. I'm ready to pull this thing off the grill. All right, now immediately off the grill, what I wanna do is just let some of that heat out of there. Oh my goodness, that smells amazing. Big herbaceous aroma coming out of there. Now we're not gonna slice into this immediately. At this point, all of the juices have kind of worked their way to the center. We're gonna let them relax while this piece of meat rests over the next probably 30 minutes or so. So we'll just sort of loosely tint this foil and set it aside. The pork butt's well rested now. I'm really excited to slice into this thing and see how it tastes. Make sure you save those juices from the foil packet because there's tons of flavor in there. All right, so first we'll discard the butcher's twine. Let's go ahead and get in there. Ooh, that is super tender. Oh, check that out. Look at all that juice. Beautiful. So I would say with the pulling this at around 190, we let this climb another 5 degrees or so, but it's still very much pull apart tender. Man, the flavor is amazing. And it's still got the fat that's been rendered. There's sort of a balance. Some of it's still holding together the slice, some of it's rendered out, but it really coats your mouth, which just carries the flavors of the herbs and everything from the outside throughout to coat your mouth. That's exactly how that's supposed to work. And let me just show you guys where my favorite cut comes from. That's what we would call the money muscle in the barbecue world. So if this is the fat cap side, and we opened up that crevice down here on the other side, it's opposite of that. So all the way down here, this is what we call the money muscle. It's the most tender part of the pork butt. And as you can see, just super juicy. That's where the really good stuff comes from. And before you serve any of this up, you just want to make sure you run it through these juices again because there's so much flavor in there. But this is basically ready to go on your Italian sandwiches. Throw that pork on some bread with some pesto, tomatoes, maybe provolone and greens. Beautiful sandwich. Speaking of greens, it'd be great on a salad, perfect for pasta. I mean, it's really versatile. Of course, if you work at All Things Barbecue, the staff is probably gonna devour it before it even leaves this table. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to head over to atbbq.com to check out all the products and the tools featured in today's video. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to thesauce.atbbq.com. All Things Barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.